All right, welcome everybody, and happy New Year. Where did the time go? I will tell you, the time between being out of here for a few days and back into this new year was, it flew by. But anyways, we are happy to be here with you, and talking today as part of the Advisor Growth webinar series. We've got a number of events lined up, which I'll share with you at the end, but we're getting great feedback on it. We love your participation. Please tell, more of your peers, colleagues, team members to join in here and participate as well anytime. The more the merrier. And, today it's a bit of a continued theme a little bit, I would say from us. And, obviously a lot of our focus is on the behavioral aspects of those client interactions and clients engagements. And so today we're talking about, basically just navigating that shift from being more product focused versus being more like authentically client-centric, right? Really focused on the client relationship. And, today I'm going to ask you to really step outside of what you believe you're doing and how you believe you're acting and the things that you're saying and how you're making people feel, and just come into this thing today just like with a level of true objectivity. I would imagine most of you know that I live inside of many very successful advisory firms across the US, across Canada. And we really help them unpack a number of things and see things that they can't see because they're in it and they're too close to the business, when it comes down to really being, once and for all, truly client-centric. And so that's what we're talking about here today. And so when you think about in your business, what is it that truly is setting you apart from everybody else, right? Like, what is it that is truly making your interactions, the way that clients or prospective clients view you, as different from everybody else? And how quickly, can you make that connection to what it is that's different about you? It's a challenge, right? Because I think to the lay person, so much of what our websites say, so much of what the industry is inundating consumers with today it's amazing, right? And all the publications and things of that nature, all the advertisements that we see on TV and on the interweb, is really, it all sounds relatively the same to the lay person. And so when you try to get yourself to be seen as different, what I want to challenge you to think of is that it really comes down to how we make people feel in these interactions, right? What we have come to recognize is meeting with financial advisors for the first time can be a very scary endeavor. People don't know what to ask, how to behave, what not to ask, what are they supposed to bring, things of that nature, even though we might ask for certain things or ask them to complete or do certain things or share certain things with us. At the end of the day, it's kind of scary. Am I going to be okay? Do I have enough? Have I done the right things to date? And am I going to be able to afford the things that they're going to recommend that I need to do so that, life is ultimately the way that I want it to be? And again, I want to come back to the fact that this is, what separates you and what differentiates you. And you hear, the industry saying that word, throwing that around a lot. It's critical, because the longer it takes us to differentiate, the more opportunities we miss, the longer it is to get people to really actually trust you and how you're trying to help and maybe the recommendations that you're trying to make. And so, give some serious thought to it's, what is it that truly sets you apart? What I'm going to say is it's probably not your independence, right? It's probably not your planning process. And we're a big process company. So that's a lot for me to say that it's not your planning process, because I think we have an unbelievable planning process. I would probably argue the best. But it's not the thing that differentiates. It's your delivery of it. It's about how you allow people to kind of experience that. And I did a 50th Friday a few weeks ago on this whole aspect of, Harvard Business, really honing in on the fact that in the 21st century, what's going to really matter in sales is relationship, that people buy and they buy from people that they trust and have a relationship with. And so, cultivating these strong relationships and ultimately the trust with clients is absolutely critical in this day and age. And, the other side of it is the more personal you can make these engagements, not the stuff that we get into around really unpacking what's important to your clients, but I'm just saying the more human and the more personal and the more safe that you can make each and every one of the interactions with clients, I believe that what you're going to find is that those are conversations and interactions and moments that they want to be in. And so, here we are in early January 3rd, and we've I'm sure you've all done work and preparing for what you want 2024 to bring, and hopefully it's a big part of having your best year ever. And what I want to challenge you early in this year to really take a step back and think about and say, how are we behaving? How are we making people feel? How are we engaging? What is our client experience? And how is that allowing us, how is that giving us an advantage to win more relationships and more opportunities? Because it's critical. And the brain has significant influence around this, right? In these very first, interactions and moments with prospective clients, that brain is looking for connection, right? It's looking for, experiences and words and things of that nature that it can connect with. And so again, if it's a feeling, it can connect in a way that it starts to feel safe, right? Because the second part of the brain and what it's after is it's that fight or flight that you hear so many people talk about, right? Is that if I can't connect with this moment in time that we're having, and it doesn't feel right or feel good, at the end of the day, protection mode is going to kick in. And this is when people shut down. This is when people disengage. And this is where people want to really, retreat from those moments. And so, again, I talk a lot of times around the connection piece, around the words, but I want to hit on today, and I'm going to share some of it with you, like some of the things that I've said before, but I'll kind of just say it again, of just how important the connection is. How we make people feel is more important than what we even say in that moment. Now, credentials and your competencies and knowledge and things of that nature are definitely, part of the process. It's part of the puzzle. It's part of what allows you to be able to demonstrate that you're knowledgeable and skillful and can help. But at the same time, early on in these relationships, the thing that matters most is how we're connecting with people on a relational level, so that they feel safe, and so that they'll open up, and so that they'll share, and they'll be more likely to trust you when it's that environment where they feel safe, right? And so that's really, the brain part of this. I've said this before, but I'll say it again, and I kind of just put it together in here, that I think at the beginning of every moment, every interaction that we have with a new client, and I think, again, it's something you can reiterate from meeting to meeting and annual reviews and things of that nature, again, about a thing that allows people to connect and feel safe, is that, listen, before we jump in today, I just want to share one simple goal that I have for our time together today. And that's to make sure that by the time you leave, you feel better than the time when you walked in. Does that make sense? Putting that at the beginning of any moment where you're about to dig into a new conversation, to dig into a new relationship, to dig into a challenging conversation, right? Because we have those moments in time where things are challenging. I've had this conversation with several of my clients over last year, and markets and performance not being what clients wanted it to be. It's probably not what you as advisors want it to be either, right? In all instances. But entering into that moment where you know that there's a challenging conversation coming, using a positioning point like this and saying, listen, you know what, like there's an issue that we're going to talk about here and address, but I want to make sure that you know one thing, that by the time you leave, I want to make sure that you feel better than the time when you walked in here today. Does that make sense? And that's really just honoring that relationship and connecting with the people and knowing, for them to know that you've got their back and you want to make sure that they understand and they're clear and what have you. So it's not just even only in those positive moments and positive interactions where this can play, but just think about this and find your own words if my words here aren't perfect for you and how you want to say it. But just, this is all about the behavioral aspects, the neuropsychology aspects of getting people comfortable and getting them to let their guard down, not let their guard down so that we can, you know, to win them and close them and all that stuff, but so that we can be in an open conversation to determine whether we're a fit for one another and whether we can help and want to move forward together. But again, I think this little simple thing at the beginning of a meeting is something far different than anybody else that I find is doing. And so think about that and how you can begin to integrate that in. You know, we talk about this and the connection, the relationship, and how important that is. But at the same time, there's a business, right, in the mix of this, right? You have a business, you have goals, you have revenue goals for your business, which means you got to meet a certain amount of the right types of people, and you've got to get those people to agree to not only want to meet with you, but to actually hire you and to then fundamentally do business with you, right? So while we want to make sure that they're warm and connected and feeling good, we as a business want to bring a very sound structure to every interaction and every conversation that we have with clients. And so at Legacy, we've basically defined or developed what we call the 4 decision system, right? And ultimately the decisions happen in and around meetings, but our premise is that, right, interactions with clients it's fundamentally about making a decision, right? Getting them to a point where they're comfortable and confident and trusting to make a decision. But we have to have strategy that's working in the background. They don't need to know about that, but we need to have strategy so that we're doing and saying the right things that are going to allow them to make the decisions that they need to make, right? And so our 4 decisions, and I'll share with you again the framework, which I've shared with you before, I'm sure. But first one is people have to agree to meet with us, right? So we got to have the right first interactions and first impressions, and we got to have the right marketing plans to put us in the right place to be meeting people. But fundamentally, we want people to say, hey, you know what? I like what you have to say. You seem like a nice person. You sound like you can help. I'd love to meet and get together and learn more, right? That's number 1. Second one is people have to agree to engage, agree to hire you. And in our work and in the work that we do with our clients, like I want to get those engagements make it as simple as possible and get it as early in the process as I can. I don't want the decision to hire me to take 3 meetings. I also want to make sure that we know when we've been hired, okay? And that may seem silly to you, but I have seen lots and lots of times over my career where advisors and teams are off doing work, but the client or prospect has never actually engaged them, right? But they're off doing work, and that's a cost to the business. My premise is we should never be doing work when we're not engaged, right? We have to have a defining moment when we know that we've been engaged, right? The third one is we have to commit. They have to commit. I think, well, maybe we both have to commit, but really fundamentally, the clients have to commit to their goals, to the priorities, to the things that they want to do and pursue. And that's critical. And we do that, in our world through that process of affirmation, we want to make sure the things that we're about to build recommendations and strategies around are the things that the client is clear that they want to solve or they want to pursue. And that's really the commitment to the goals. And then the fourth is really around the commitment to implementation, right? That if we are understanding what's important to you and what matters to you, and you agree that these are the things that are most important and you sign off on these, that you're going to make the decisions to move forward and implement those decisions. Okay. And so that's the fourth decision. So we put that into a context, which again, I go back to, the statement I made at the beginning of any meeting that I would suggest you think about incorporating, which is, listen, we want to make sure that by the end of our time here together, you feel better than you did when you walked in, right? And at the same time, around that meeting, when I want to get engaged and I want to get hired, I've got very specific strategy that's operating behind the scenes, which I know statistically a higher percentage of the time is going to mean we are getting engaged and hired because of how we run, manage, and orchestrate that time together. I've said for years that as advisors, and I did this in my own career as an advisor, where we spend more time preparing or trying to get a meeting with a prospect than we do preparing for that first meeting with the prospect. Okay, that's a real problem. And we do that because we've had a lot of sales meetings, we've had a lot of approaches, we've had a lot of first meetings. But the reality is that is a performance, and the deciding factor is whether you get hired or not, right? And so it's important to take the time to really focus on that, to prepare for that, to rehearse that, to ensure that the result, a higher percentage of the time, is that you actually get hired. I'm not going to go through this whole flow, but hopefully you can see here how the decisions, right, run and operate inside of the context of an overall client experience. This is the kind of work that we're getting into with clients today, where we are basically customizing that client experience around the decisions and around the operational structures of that business, big or small, right? Big, large firms and small, 2 and 3 and 4 person firms, right? So like everywhere in between. But it really is about building the systems and processes so that you can create scale and all of those things, right? And capacity for your business, but it's also so that you can win more, right? So that you can win more opportunities. And again, inside of this structure brings a very strong relational strategy and a connecting strategy, to those relationships. But that's not something I would suggest putting in front of a client. There are other pieces, obviously, that we have that will draw and connect with clients more powerfully. But at the end of the day, we need to be visual, right? Because people make decisions and connect with things and process information based upon what they can see 65% of the time. It's a huge number. And so even if you're poetic, right, and your words are perfect and really, really tight, if you don't have a visual to connect in that moment, right, you're not connecting with everybody. I have this challenge all the time. I am 100% a visual processor. And I find that when people are trying to communicate things to me that there should be a picture for, I'm disengaged from what they're saying. I'm trying to listen, but I'm trying to create a picture for what it is you're trying to tell me, right? And so it's a major issue. We have to be able to make sure that we have pictures that go along with our words, because 30% of the words matter, right? 30% of the people, they connect with things, right? And ultimately, I'll argue, make decisions around things based upon the words and the things that they hear. So if you look at 95% of the population, it's around what we see and what we hear. And so if you can bring both of those things, you're hitting on all cylinders with the people that you're meeting with, right? The 5% of the kinesthetics. But this is super important when we think about making those connections and building the trust. We got to give people what it is they need, right? And, I was talking to somebody about this before the holidays, and I wanted to bring this into this talk here today, is that, when I take a step back and I have these conversations with our clients and we kind of unpack what's happening, at the end of the day, the typical allocation around that approach meeting or that client experience, about 20% of the time is really spent around the what and the why. What's important to you and why is that important to you? Because your prospective clients and even your clients don't have that level of clarity around what it is they really want and why that's important to them as it relates to themselves, to their family, to their business, whatever the entity might be. But we're still spending the lion's share of the time and the interactions behind the scene or client facing around the solution, around the strategy, and around the how do we actually solve that for you. And I want to be clear that both of these are critically important, right? Like you could spend more time in discovery and less time in solutions, as we would suggest at Legacy. But at the end of the day, if you can't solve it, right, based upon what you understand, it's still going to be worthless, right? So we have to have the technical skills and competencies to be able to bring the problem. The problem, however, is, and why we can sound like everybody else and feel like everybody else in those moments, is the reality is that we're not spending enough time helping people get clear on what it is that truly matters to them and why, right? In my eyes, that first meeting ought to be the tipping point, the starting point for that, rather, I would say, not the tipping point, the starting point for that, right? It's the starting point for the conversation around what's important to you and why, right? But it's very little time is being spent on that in that first meeting. And in fact, like a first meeting is typically around, understanding all their facts, data, and information, and then we're going to talk about their goals. And, what I'm constantly telling my clients is it's impossible to do both of those well in one meeting. Impossible. And so for us, where we might hear things that resemble a goal, we might hear things that resemble a vision or a value, right? At the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to make sure we have a good relational connection and fit. Like, is this somebody who I want to work with? And do they like me and want to work with me? And does their circumstance financially warrant the type of work that we do? Can we do our best work here? That's really all that's trying to happen in that first meeting. And again, we need to have a whole separate meeting, right, to really quantify and understand what it is that's truly important to these people and why. And so when you look at the solution part of this, and I'll get to this in a minute, what I'm saying is too much time is being spent on all the analysis and all the building the plan and all of those things, but a lot of times falling short because they lack the connection to what it is people want or why, or at least the sale and the implementation becomes harder because they are lacking on the what is important to them and why, and the verification of that, right? I love this quote by Einstein, and I brought it in here today. I've used this over the years quite a bit, but Einstein saying that if he had an hour to save the world, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. It's like, just think about that for a minute. Here's one of the smartest people in the world ever to walk this planet, right? And 55 minutes would be around what's important and why. What are we trying to solve, and why is it that we're trying to solve it? Because at that point in time, once you have that clarity and the client has the commitment and clarity around what they want and why, the solution actually becomes the easy part, right? You've got all of the technical skills and the years and the competencies that you develop. That part becomes easy. The problem is in traditional financial advisory interactions is the advisor gets to that point of clarity around what the solution is far before the client does. And that's always going to be the case. But we have to refrain from bringing that solution until the client has the level of clarity around what's the actual problem we're trying to solve. Hopefully that makes sense and that's hitting home to you, because if you can refrain that solution for a little bit and make sure that they're totally bought in and committed to the problem that they want to solve or the opportunity they want to pursue, right? It doesn't have to always be a problem. Then we can bring the solutions that we can always connect back to what does that solve or get or achieve for them, right? That's another part of the missing link to get future decisions made, right? Is we always have to tick and tie the recommendations back to what it solves, what it gets for them, right? And so, in Legacy's world, and again, these are 80-20 Pareto principle concepts here, but I think you get the point, is that, listen, we spend the majority of the time connecting with the client about what's a matter to them and what's important to them and all of those types of things, so that we can then go and very smartly design the appropriate solutions to help them get it, right? But the client-facing time, the time in front of the client, is all about helping them get clear, not me get clear on what they want and why, because it's not my plan, it's not my goals, it's not my vision, right? This is about spending the appropriate time to help the clients get clear on what they want and why, so then you can show them how to get it, you can show them how to achieve it. And again, your client experience can absolutely do this if you're following what we showed in that 4-decision workflow, right? You can couple that into meetings with a strategy and a structure so that your allocation around your client experience is appropriate. And what I would argue is that the 20% around the solution is not maybe the time that it takes you to design it, but it is representative of the time that it takes a client to say yes, to move. Where I find our clients that are executing what I'm sharing with you here today are saving tremendous amounts of time and efficiency is around the presentation of recommendations, the solutions to what the client wants. It's so much less time than otherwise they would have done and that they'd previously done in their other attempts in meetings, very similar to this. And again, it's because, using tools like our Qualitate application and the conversations that we're teaching advisors to have and facilitate around that what and why and documenting it, it never becomes vapor. It always stays present in the relationships, so that when you're making recommendations to the client, you can always tick it back to what do you want? What's important to you, right? What are the priorities that you've signed off on along the way? And again, that solution solves that. And there is where you limit the challenges, the refrainment, the hesitation, right? When I go back to the brain slide that I showed you earlier around, connection and protection, when you're presenting recommendations to me that are using words and showing things that I said were important to me, my family, my business, like whatever, my kids, right? And then you show me a solution that gets me that, man, I am feeling connected and heard, but I'm also feeling protected and safe, right? Because this is about what matters to me. The challenge, we go on and on about the goals and all of those things, but the reality is what most are doing are superimposing goals on their clients and the things that they ought to be doing and pursuing because it's in alignment with a product or a service that they provide. And what I'm saying is very different from that, right? This is about aligning with what the client wants and helping facilitate that out of them, because most of us don't know. We don't take the time to sit and get really, really clear around what it is that's actually really important to us through this planning process. And again, that's what we're talking about here. The planning horizon in that element, if you go back to the visual orientation of 65% of the world are visual processors, and 65% and 30% are auditory processors, the words. The planning horizon, I feel honored in the fact that we came up with this, and people tell us that this is one of the most powerful opening conversation pieces that they've ever been able to deliver in their process, in their approach, because it allows you to totally separate yourself apart, right? The value that you bring to these client relationships is the fact that you help them to address both realms, but your work together starts at a very different realm than most in financial services begin, which is around the values, the visions, and the goals. Now, we don't have to solve that in the first meeting. We just have to share that. We just have to help people get aligned in that first meeting with the fact and the reality of the fact that the things that they're doing today and the advice that they're getting today, that they're lacking clarity and confidence if it has them on track above the horizon, how they want things to be one day. Are the things you're doing today and the advice you're getting today, is it alignment with what it is you value as an individual, as a family, as a business owner? Is it in alignment with a vision? Is it moving you closer to how you want things to be one day, right? And are the goals clearly defined and actionable that are actually making that a reality? Most of the people that you're meeting with are going to say, at best, you know what? We don't know. And that's the opportunity to engage and help them solve that and help create that clarity. And so the planning horizon is a powerful tool. In doing that, the reality is that, as I said, that whole 80-20 perspective is your competition's trying to get the ones that aren't starting below the horizon, right, with an idea, a concept, a strategy, or something of that nature, are in a rush to get there, okay? The ones that aren't starting there are in a rush to get there. This is the opportunity that brings really good prospective clients to you. Listen, I don't know everybody who's on this call here today because I can't see the list, but I'm going to tell you, for probably everybody here, the people that you're calling on and that you want to work with and that you want to make clients for your business all have at least one advisor. Many of them have multiple people that are advising them today or have over the years, okay? The reality is they've gotten sold products, they've gotten taken through different planning approaches and things of that nature and strategies over the years, but nobody has truly helped them get clear above the horizon on what it is they want, what's truly important to them, and how in alignment are the things that they're doing and pursuing and executing. How in alignment is that for them? That is the hook. That's the opportunity. That's the differentiator. That's the thing that's going to allow you to open up more doors in this 2024 new year than you ever have before. Because once you help them clarify above that horizon, then you get to bring them down below the horizon and help solve in the areas that you can help them solve and execute, but also align the right resources, right, around that planning table that you've seen us talk about for so long and that we write about in the right side of the table. You get to actually build the team and lead the team and, elevate yourself into that, most trusted advisor role and capacity. So I hope for some of you, this is a good reminder. I hope for others, this is, it's just a good awakening. As I said earlier, you're all talented and doing great things. And I want you to kind of come into this today with the beginner's mind and say, how can we be better, right? It's a new year, right? How can we be better? How can we make our process better? How can we make our experience better? How can we make our language better to drive greater and better results for the business? As we think about 2024 and beyond, and we want to be here to support you in this. We love the fact that, you come out and participate in these webinar series, and we're going to keep, preaching and teaching. We've got lots and lots of resources behind the scene, as I would imagine you all know. Our advisor growth journey is full of teachings and tools and resources, for each and every one of you and your teams as well, not just lead advisors, but as you're thinking about building out these experiences across your business, oftentimes it takes a team and the involvement of the team. As I said, we've got some events that are going to continue to come in January. We've got a couple of more events. We've got an event in February We're talking about generational wealth, and in later on in January, we're talking about our Qualitate application at the end of January, and then believe it or not, we're going to be talking about chatbot GPT and how you can be leveraging that in your advisor marketing strategy and the things that you're executing on. So we look forward to you being a part of that. If you have questions along the way, hopefully all of you know Michael. He's probably how you got here today. But feel free to reach out to him. Let us know how we can help. And, as always, we appreciate you being here. Welcome to a new year. Let's make sure it's a great one. Have a great rest of your week. Cheers.